January 2016. German police raid homes across the country as part of a move to take down an international human trafficking network. It's the fastest growing crime in the world. But sites like this are rare. This is 21st century crime. Hard to track, low risk, and high reward for the criminal gangs behind it.
They're making $250,000 a year, just one girl. They're making millions off of 10 to 15.
Today's biggest criminals could be trafficking humans, drugs, or weapons. The authorities charged with stopping them have found some unlikely new partners: banks.
Identifying the proceeds of criminal activity is an extremely complicated business. And it's something of an arms race, because obviously as we get better at detection, criminals get better at evading.
Now technology companies are also disrupting the world of crime.
What this technology does is allow someone to truly follow the money. It was sort of random chance before. Now we're really following the money.
Canada has a huge problem with human trafficking. A crime which comes in many forms, but always coercing, moving, and exploiting its victims for financial gain. Here, 60% of victims are under 18. Tamir was trafficked from Hungary to Canada, aged 21. She understands the mindset of the traffickers, who often go undetected within familiar surroundings, such as shopping malls.
Usually malls are a pretty popular place for young girls to hang out. This is where they come during lunchtime, after school. But unfortunately, the traffickers also know where they hang out, so traffickers come here as well.
A trafficker will spend a week or two watching girls before he targets the most vulnerable one, paying her attention and making her feel special.
You don't need a lot of time to make a teenager girl fall in love with you. Normally, it takes less than 2 weeks for the girl to be taken away from her family and loved ones and being trafficked.
The traffickers move the girls out of state, then the real manipulation begins.
He gets her on drugs, and he invites his friends over, and they come into the room, and normally this is what they do, it's a formula. And she would look at him and say, "What do you want me to do with your friends?" And he's like, "Well, please me." And she's confused, but she wants to please him. So she starts doing things with his friends.
It's all part of the trafficker's plan to trap the girl, and he films it.
So the next morning, she may feel remorse and say, "I don't understand what's going on, I just want to go home." And he may say, "You want to go home? Why don't I put this on your Instagram or Facebook, show everybody what kind of a whore you are?" And she would be like, "No, please don't. What do you want me to do?" And he's like, "Well, there's a client next door. Go and take care of him and leave the money on the desk."
Girls can be resold, making the traffickers millions. To the traffickers, they're commodities. And Tamir knows firsthand the extent the criminals will go to hold on to them. She was forced to work in Canada's sex industry.
One of the stories they always told us, if we leave, they'll take out the baseball bat that's already have blood stains from other girls, and they will hit us in the back of our head, and then the back and the legs, and then we'll collapse, and they'll beat us till we are black and blue, and they will put our body in a black garbage bag, and then they put our body in a Lake Ontario, and they will take our passport and send it back with another girl, and no one will ever know what happened to us. They told us that story every single day.
Toronto is Canada's human trafficking hub. 885 reported cases here over the last 4 years are likely just a glimpse at the full scale of the problem. Detective Sergeant Nunzio Tramontosi heads up the Toronto Police Service Human Trafficking Enforcement Team.
It's a crime that doesn't spare any ethnicity or any nationality.
These pimps, traffickers see a vulnerability and they expose it and they pounce on it. And then they sell these girls a dream, and unfortunately it isn't a dream, it's a nightmare.
Like many 21st century crimes, it's hidden from sight, within communities and away from the streets, which makes it one of the hardest crimes to fight, because the girls are scattered throughout the city.
They don't stay in one place very long. They will have a female victim and stay 2 or 3 days, do their business, put up their ads, and then leave.
The only way police can find the girls is trawling through online ads.
It's evolved with technology. Everything's hidden behind a computer now. That has enabled the pimps to be anonymous. In this one, it says Daddy's Little. A lot of victims call their traffickers Daddy. What my officer's gonna do is gonna try to make a date with her and see if we can communicate with her.
She said, "Hey babe, yes, I'm available. And it's $200 an hour, babe." I'll ask her what time.
Undercover officers spend thousands of man-hours conversing with and texting with girls. But even if they find them, the girls are often too afraid to testify against their traffickers. Having escaped her captors, Tamia set up a safe house for trafficked girls and became an activist. In 6 years, she saw 500 court cases lead to only 18 convictions. But everything changed after she was invited to look at the bank statements of a trafficked girl.
I looked at the transactions and the details, and I said to myself, good Lord, this could have helped in so many investigations. That's black and white evidence right there that the victim is making the money, but she's not spending it on herself.
Tamia saw thousands of dollars deposited into the girl's account, and every few days the amount was transferred to the trafficker. Realizing that the way to find the criminals was to follow the money, Tamia decided to follow the money men. She stood up at a national conference for bankers and shared her life story.
I need your help. Like, can anybody promise me that now that you heard my story and now you know how powerful can you be, can you just promise me that you're gonna join us in this fight? It's all Canadian bankers. So one hand goes up at the front, and this man gets up and he says very quietly, my boss doesn't know this yet, but sign me up.
That man was Peter Warwick, Director of Anti-Money Laundering Risk Intelligence at the Bank of Montreal.
It was a wake-up call to me. I mean, we're in the heart of the financial district. We're in the middle of the 5 major banks in Canada that control the bulk of the finances in Canada and the bulk of the transactions that are occurring through bank accounts and things like that. You know, the amount of information any bank holds is incredible.
Within a month, Peter had Canada's top 5 banks and the financial regulator on board, and Project Protect was launched.
Prior to December 2015, I didn't have a clue that we had a problem with human trafficking in Canada, so I learned very quickly, and as I learned and others learned, we found new indicators, which we immediately shared with each other.
The bankers started looking for patterns among customers' transactions that could identify the behavior of a sex trafficker. Certain suspicious activities, like a string of late-night deposits into multiple ATM machines, would indicate that a bank should take a closer look at an account. If they found deposits from different states, multiple bookings of hotels, taxis or payments for online advertising, the chances were they could be looking at the account of a trafficker. And then they would share the data with law enforcement. In 2017, this approach helped the police to crack an international trafficking ring, leading to the rescue of 9 Portuguese girls and the arrest of 2 traffickers involved in funneling over $3 million to Europe. In just 12 months, reports on human trafficking from Canada's banks to the police increased by 350%. But that's just the tip of the iceberg. Globally, human trafficking is estimated to be worth $150 billion a year. And all that money has to end up somewhere. These are some of the ill-gotten gains from a web of criminal activity that takes in the trafficking of humans, weapons, and illegal drugs.
We've seen some weird and wonderful assets, things like gold bars, which were £250,000 each, and nearly £2.5 million worth of gold bullion. Things like the 550-ton cargo vessels, the luxury yachts, the motor cruisers that are filled and lined with cocaine. We're selling a yacht next week that was used in a very tragic case to smuggle illegal immigrants into the country.
Former tax investigator Aidan Larkin leads the team at Wilson's Auction House in Belfast, Northern Ireland. Today, they're selling off over £250,000 worth of property from convicted criminals. Proceeds from auctions like this are returned to the public purse to fund law enforcement and to compensate victims. Aidan's team works with police forces across the EU, often helping seize the assets of the criminals who've been caught trying to clean up their dirty money.
The star of the show, the 911 GTS, should fetch anywhere in the region of £80,000.
An estimated $2 to $4 trillion of illicit funds are laundered each year, much of it by organised crime networks operating across borders.
Nowadays, you can walk through an airport, and for example, if someone was to say to the border official, it's an Audemars Piguet watch, there's only a select amount of people that would actually know what that watch is. Some of the watches, a Richard Mille watch with a rubber strap, is worth £250,000. So we've seen quite a few cases where people who are wanting to move money between jurisdictions in and out of different countries will simply convert that cash and convert that asset, sell the big asset, sell the mansion, and turn it into one expensive watch. £10,000 and it's away, £2,000.
Here, people can bid on the spoils that have been captured. But mostly, criminals who launder money are getting away with it.
Sold for $22,250.
Each year, only 1% of illicit funds worldwide are even identified. In the UK, Europe, and America, banks have come under ever greater pressure from regulators to root out the dirty money in their systems. For a long time, results were mixed. Over a 9-year period, financial institutions were fined a total of over $321 billion for failing to do enough. Some even fell foul of the law themselves.
We are here today to announce the filing of criminal charges against HSBC Bank, both its U.S. entity, HSBC US, and the parent HSBC Group, for its sustained and systemic failure to guard against the corruption of our financial system by drug traffickers and other criminals, and for evading U.S. sanctions law.
HSBC, one of the world's largest banking groups, admitted it had failed to prevent drug cartels from laundering at least $881 million in trafficking proceeds through the bank. In a deferred prosecution agreement with the US Department of Justice, the bank accepted it had knowingly engaged in conduct and practices that allowed sanctioned entities in the Middle East and elsewhere to move money. HSBC paid a settlement of over $1.9 billion, an unprecedented amount, but equivalent to just 5 weeks' worth of the bank's global profits.
The public perception of banks has obviously not been great over the last few years, and HSBC as a firm particularly understands the consequences of falling short when it comes to financial crime risk management. I hope the work we're doing can challenge that perception because we're working continuously with law enforcement to tackle issues like human trafficking. Identifying the proceeds of criminal activity is an extremely complicated business. Sophisticated criminals, so ones who are involved in large-scale human trafficking and other criminal activity, they've developed their techniques over many years. And we have to try and identify that. We see layers of front companies, so as money comes into the financial system, it'll come into one organisation, and then it will be moved around many layers of front companies before it finally arrives at its intended destination.
Every day, 1.2 billion transactions take place in the global financial system. Faced with the prospect of more big fines, banks have increasingly erred on the side of caution by flagging any transactions that look vaguely suspicious.
We as an institution would always err on the side of reporting rather than not reporting. And of course, that brings with it challenges as well as benefits.
Too much information can be as challenging as not enough. Britain's National Crime Agency receives over 400,000 reports of suspicious financial activity every year, 80% of which are from banks. The agency's Economic Crimes Command has the unenviable task of identifying the actual criminals' money flowing through the financial system.
It is very much looking for a needle in a haystack. And not only are we looking for a needle in a haystack, we're looking for that in a globalised world where organised crime has become more sophisticated, where communications have become more sophisticated, and where the financial services provided have become ever more sophisticated.
A more sophisticated problem has demanded a more sophisticated response. In 2015, British law enforcement and banks came together to form the Joint Money Laundering Intelligence Task Force.
There was a step change at the top of the banks with the CEOs and their boards in recognising that they were willing to and wanted to work closely with law enforcement. And there was a step change certainly in law enforcement, and I was very much involved with that when we were saying, actually, we want to and need to work with the banks to build a new relationship built on a trust and confidence where we overcome those barriers, where we share real information about real people doing real crimes.
Many banks signalled they were keen to help, but their own systems remained a blunt tool. Around 90% of banks' alerts of suspicious activity were actually entirely innocent. Far from finding criminals, they were more often blocking legitimate customers. But a new generation of financial technology, or fintech companies, are emerging, intent on providing a solution. David McLaughlin heads one of them.
Doing anything that I could do to help make it harder for criminals to move their money around the world was something that was important to me.
In an unassuming suburban office, Quantiverse has developed machine learning technology that is already being used by some of the world's biggest banks.
What this technology does is allow someone to truly follow the money. It was sort of random chance before. Now we're really following the money.
The team here is training the company's computer system to identify potential criminal activity on its own.
Every day it is finding new ways that criminals are changing their behavior, and every day it's identifying those and learning from those to be able to catch it when it happens again the next day.
Fed initially with several years' worth of data from a major global bank, Quantiverse's system learnt what both legitimate and suspicious business activities look like.
So this is a dashboard that the application would generate after it's run a set of analytics.
The application looks at factors, including how much money is being moved, how quickly, and to where, as it searches for patterns and anomalies.
Normally, we would expect to see, in this case, a ship that's getting ready to go out to sea. They would stock up with bait, do all the maintenance, all the food, everything they needed to do, and you'd see a spike. In this particular case, we see that the dollar values that were leaving the account were significantly less than what we would have expected from a normal ship behaving in this fashion. And so when we drill into the details, fuel costs, maintenance costs, operational expenses, and so forth were all as expected, but the payroll was much lower than we would have expected. And so that then is a tip-off that there might be some human trafficking or slavery involved.
Analysing just 8 different characteristics generates over 61 million permutations for the system to evaluate as it identifies the bad guys.
Each of these things then get linked together in a network that allows us to see how they're connected to one another. So individuals, companies. We can see what information about each of them. We can see information about the nature of the relationships between the parties. And then we can also begin to identify so-called communities.
Quantiverse's software flagged suspicious behavior around one such community in Panama. A year later, one of the parties was under arrest and being described as one of the world's most significant drug money launderers. But the technology is still in its infancy. It's only as good as the data it gets fed, and there are often heavy restrictions on banks sharing data outside their own area of operation. The trouble is, 21st century crime knows no such limits. Thailand is one of the world's largest seafood exporters. It's a $6.5 billion business, one that exploits many of the estimated 425,000 people in modern slavery in this country. Many are trafficked by large criminal networks across several international borders. Samart was promised a job as a security guard in a Thai fishing port, but instead he was drugged.
เขาก็หมายถึงว่าตื่นมาอีกทีนึงก็คืออยู่บนเรือใหญ่มากๆเป็นเรือลากที่อยู่บนที่ว่าอยู่เขาบอกว่าตรงนั้นอยู่สิงคโปร์ตอนนี้ผมก็เลยแล้วก็ไปถามคนในเรือเขาบอกว่าตอนนี้เรือลำนี้กำลังจะไปประเทศอินโดนีเซียเพื่อไปลากปลา
Samart had been trafficked. He would be trapped on the boat, effectively enslaved for the next 8 years.
สภาพแล้วก็การทำงานก็เริ่มตั้งแต่ตี3ตี4กว่าจะเลิกก็ตี1ถ้าเราไม่ทำเราก็ถูกทำร้ายเราก็ถูกตีไม่สบายเป็นไข้เป็นแผลเป็นอะไรทั้งนั้นเราก็ต้องออกมาทำงานเราต้องออกมาทำงานก็อยู่ตามอัตคัดคือว่าที่พักคนมันจะน้อยกว่าที่เก็บปลามากกว่า
Samart was ultimately able to take his captors to court, but most survivors can't. The criminals are left to continue their activity elsewhere in Thailand. Of the estimated 16 million forced labour victims worldwide, only 1,038 cases were prosecuted in 2016. Disrupting criminal activity on this scale depends on knowing exactly where to look for evidence and finding a way to get the data to the banks and their fintech partners. That's where this woman comes in. Archana Katecha, a Hong Kong-based lawyer, is on her way to meet local contacts with first-hand information about trafficking in Thailand. She works for Liberty Asia, an NGO dedicated to bridging the crucial gap between what the locals know and the bank's computer systems are missing.
It's so potent to have the eyes and ears on the ground and to be able to take that information from the front line and to share it with people who are on the front desk millions of miles away making decisions that are so critical to this business.
Liberty Asia has built a network of contacts in 32 NGOs across Southeast Asia to find and share information. This morning, Archana is meeting a man who could be an important addition to that network. Sompong Sageo heads up a workers' rights group that's become the first port of call for trafficked fishermen.
What percentage of victims you've worked with have actually been able to take their case forward? And how many of those have resulted in success for the victims?
ก็สังเกตเห็นว่าเคสลูกเรือประมงอินโดนีเซียเนี่ยประมาณเกือบ 90% ไม่ตกเป็นเหยื่อค้ามนุษย์แต่นิยามของเราบอกว่าเป็นค้ามนุษย์เจ้าที่ตำรวจจับกุมส่วนใหญ่ก็เป็นพวกโบรกเกอร์เป็นตัวเล็กตัวน้อยปลาซิวไปสร้อยไปไม่ได้สาวถึงเจ้าของเรือไม่ได้สาวถึงผู้ประกอบการจริงๆเราก็เชื่อได้ว่ามันมีเรื่องของผู้มีอิทธิพลท้องถิ่นและผู้มีอิทธิพลท้องถิ่นก็คงมีการประสานสอดคล้องเรื่องผลประโยชน์
Understanding complex local factors like corruption is one key piece of the intelligence picture Archana and her partners try to build. Another comes via contacts with the people who really know how things work. Mr. J is an ex-trafficker who has brought hundreds of people from neighbouring countries to the Thai fishing industry.
มีเนี่ยบ้านเท่าเกเรือเหมือนกันนะนี่ซื้อเนี่ยไปข้างซ้ายเนี่ยเรือจอดหลังบ้านอย่างงี้ส่วนมากนี่ไอ้ลูกเรือนี่คนไทยไม่ค่อยถามพี่จริงนี่ถูกน้อยผิดเยอะนายจ้างเขาฉลาดในหน้านี่หลอกลายมาเขาไม่รู้เขาไม่สนเลยเวลามีปัญหาเขาบอกเขาไม่รู้จริงๆไม่รู้จริงๆเขาแค่รู้แค่หาเงินมาหาปลามาก็พอลักษณะอย่างนี้
These insights help the NGOs build an intimate understanding of how the criminal networks operate.
ตำรวจก็เรียกไอ้หน้าลงเลยเอ้ยไอ้ผู้ชาย2 คนอายุแค่นี้มึงเอาไหมมาเลยก็ฝากไปคิวมอเตอร์ไซค์คิวข้างหน้าโรงพักไอ้คิวพวกคิวเนี่ยรู้เขาไปให้เรือท่าเรือเอาเงินค่าติ๊บตับเนี่ย 2,000 3,000 4,000 อย่างเงี้ยตรงยาวเลยพี่
As the picture on the ground becomes clearer, the NGOs flag up local court cases so that Liberty Asia can gather hard data, the names of the arrested and prosecuted. It then makes them accessible to over 9,000 banks globally and to key technology partners like Quantiverse.
So this is an email that we received from Liberty Asia. They send us information about bad guys that they've found.
And so those names of those individuals are now in our database. And so anytime there's a transaction in the future, anytime we see a transaction, regardless where it comes from, we're scanning against the database that we've been collecting of people. And so those 3 people are in there now forever and immutable. If they ever do some transaction through some financial services organization, we're going to know it. If it's a client of ours. And we're going to see them and we're going to understand that those people are engaged in human trafficking.
Back in Bangkok, Archana is reviewing Liberty Asia's latest detailed analysis of human trafficking networks to take directly to the banks.
Where we see all of this information cascading into is a place where banks are saying, you know, we now understand what this looks like on the ground. So now we're in a more informed position to make decisions about accounts and to be able to collaborate with law enforcement on investigations.
Technological innovation is driving these new partnerships, but it's also helping many of the groups they're targeting. Across the world, criminals themselves are constantly exploring the latest tools, like cryptocurrencies, that will help them keep their money online and off the grid. It's a technological arms race between them and the men and women on their tail.
It is that cat and mouse game, you know. It's very important for the banks, the police to adapt to new and evolving technology. Because if we don't adapt to that technology, we're going to be left behind. And traffickers are going to be able to do their work without any consequence.
21st century criminals can operate in the shadows more easily than ever before. Their crimes may be hard to spot, but the impact isn't, bringing misery, pain, and death to millions of victims around the world. New opportunities to disrupt those crimes could be the key to finally bringing some relief to those whose lives are ruined.